We gather tonight with mixed emotions as we have become aware that there was yet another school shooting today in Texas. In the midst of our celebration this weekend, we recognize and empathize with the town and the families affected in light of the reality of the loss they are experiencing today. This is reported by CNN to be the 22nd school shooting this year alone. When and how we will end this ongoing issue is our ongoing lament.
We invite you to a moment of silence as we proceed tonight to reflect on how we might each become sowers of justice in response to this ongoing national tragedy that we witness on such a regular basis.
Thank you.
Please be seated. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this evening's Baccalaureate service. As I greeted some of the graduates just a moment ago and walked around and felt a bit of the nervous energy and excitement, it is a wonderful feeling tonight. A special welcome to the parents, grandparents, extended family, and friends of the class of 2018. Thank you for the time, the care, and yes, the resources and the love that you have given to make this weekend possible. In appreciation for all you have done, I hope you would join us following the service for the president and faculty reception outside, actually inside Baker Refectory, unfortunately. To the class of 2018, we are grateful for your contributions to the life of this college. And we wish you well as you commence a new journey and experience new challenges and opportunities as Juniata graduates. This service at this time, the night before your graduation, is also an extraordinary opportunity to reflect on the personal journey that was your Juniata experience. Just think for a moment about the people you have met, the friendships you have made, the mentors you have chosen, and the knowledge that you have absorbed. You have changed in profound ways over the past several years, and now is the time to acknowledge it, learn from it, and yes, celebrate it. So be grateful for the time together this evening and appreciate the journey that you have crafted, as this will undoubtedly provide meaningful support for your next one. Please join me now as we enter this hour of worship inspired by the Juniata College Choir.
Intro in te conspectueus in exultatione jubilate Deo, jubilate Deo, jubilate Deo, jubilate Deo, jubilate Deo, jubilate Deo, Deo. Quoniam suavis est Dominus, in eterna misericordia meus. Quoniam suavis est Dominus, generazione in generazione. Veritas Deo, te Deo, jubilat 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 te Deo. Jubilate Deo omnis terra.
Hello, everyone, and good evening. The Shehechianu is the traditional Jewish blessing for special occasions and new things. Like our new graduates, their new beginnings, and the many new experiences they will all have after leaving Juniata. Sadly, new lawn goats will not be something I can bless this evening. However, the Shehechianu is a prayer of thanksgiving and celebration, and it is a perfect prayer for occasions such as tonight. Without further ado, in Hebrew, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. And in English, blessed are you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, who has given us life, sustained us, and helped us to reach this moment.
As we reflected together about this evening, we came to an agreement that we wanted to focus our final evening together as Juniata seniors on the idea of sowing seeds of justice. Over the past years, we have grown together, explored our world and our place in it from many new perspectives, and we have been challenged to think deeply about how we want to live as leaders in this world of ours as our future unfolds. So tonight, we want to challenge all of us who have gathered in this place to consider over the next hour what it means to sow seeds of justice. We have handed each of you a packet of wildflower seeds to take with you, with the desire that you will take a bit of what you hear tonight back to your homes and into new jobs or graduate education as you go out from here this weekend. May these seeds be a reminder of the blessing that being part of the Juniata community has been to us and a source of inspiration as they grow. Plant them, nurture them, and may your life blossom as the flowers bloom, spreading joy and encouragement as they do. We hope and pray that you will be blessed by having taken this time to celebrate with us, and that you will be inspired to look for new ways to also be sowers of justice in our world. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you brought your singing voices with you. If you would, look in your program. You'll find the music to one of my favorite songs. I'm going to sing it the first time through for you and then ask you to stand and join me the second time through. And before we start, I want to just point out the most commonly flubbed up area of the song so that you can be your best singer tonight. Right at the end, just before the last justice and joy, there's a longer pause there than you think it is. Okay? A place at the table for everyone born, clean water and bread, a shelter, a space, a safe place for growing, for everyone born, a star overhead. And God will delight when we are creators of justice, joy. Would you stand and sing with me? For woman and man, a place at the table, revising the roles, deciding the share, with wisdom and grace, dividing the power, for woman and man, a system that's fair. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy.
The Hebrew Scriptures are full of examples of what it means to act justly towards others. In this passage, the Israelites are reminded that the smallest action of compassion towards those who are most vulnerable in a society matters. Why? Because when you were slaves in Egypt, you received God's justice. So never forget that those mistreated and neglected are no different from you, and all people deserve compassion and justice. Deuteronomy 24 says, "When you are harvesting in your field and you overlook a sheaf, do not go back and get it. Leave it for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat the olives from your trees, do not go over the branches a second time. Leave what remains for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. When you harvest the grapes in your vineyard, do not go over the vines again. Leave what remains for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. This is why I command you to do this."
Today, I'd like to tell you a story about sowing seeds. I bought an aloe plant about a year before I came to Juniata, and I've had it with me every year I've been here. So this aloe plant and I have been through a lot together. Every year I've had it, it develops a few extra sprouts of baby aloe plants that I usually take home to family. This year, though, it went a little nuts. At the point that I had 20 aloe plants, somehow sharing one pot, I decided it was time to call in reinforcements. So, in typical broke college student fashion, instead of buying flower pots, I proceeded to cut an egg carton into individual egg shapes, which is harder than it sounds, by the way. I used a spoon to dig up some soil, and soon I was handing out little repotted aloe plants to my friends who were willing to take them. At first, I was just relieved to get rid of the surplus. Later on, though, I began to reflect on how beautiful it is to think of little pieces of the aloe plant I've shared so much with, staying with my friends, even though we're about to go our separate ways. To think that maybe someday they would have little aloe plant babies of their own and keep spreading the aloe plant love in the world. Now, for all of you almost college graduate critical thinkers out there who are ready to point out that I didn't actually sow any seeds in that story, I just repotted some plants. Touché. I'm glad Juniata has served you well. But bear with me a little longer, because I think it's important to remember that sowing the seeds is only half the battle. It's an important half, certainly, but simply giving someone a planted seed does not mean that they are going to live happily ever after with that aloe plant. In fact, within 2 weeks of the aloe plant readoption campaign, multiple people, who will remain nameless for the sake of their reputations, let me know they had already killed off their aloe plants. And that makes what could have been a really uplifting metaphor about the long-lasting positive impacts of our actions on others kind of dark and depressing. However, it does underscore 2 really important points. First, that it's not just about the seeds we sow, it's also about the seeds we choose to nurture. The fact that we're here, about to graduate, means we've all nurtured some seeds during our time at Juniata. We've found something, a passion, an interest worth pursuing, and we've pursued it. For me, that passion has been peace and conflict studies. I love PAX because it's helped me make sense of the conflicts I see in my life and in the world around me. It's helped me see systems and problems I want to fix and begin to understand how to go about fixing them. And the same is true for so many of us. Whether through biology, chemistry, business, history, world languages, communication, math, or any of the other disciplines Juniata offers, we've all nurtured seeds of passion during our time here. We've nurtured hopes for ways to make the world a little bit better in our own way, for ways to sow some seeds of justice. And it hasn't always been easy. Like the rest of the world, Juniata is far from a perfect community. During our years here, there have been many seeds of justice on this campus in need of more nurturing. My hope for all of us is that we learn from our time here as we move on to whatever's next, that we remember to nurture what's important, and also that it's important to nurture. I hope wherever we find ourselves, we take the time to nurture the seeds we plant, but also to nurture the seeds of justice that were planted long before we got there. The second reason I told you the story about the time my friends killed my baby aloe plants is that I want us to remember that sowing seeds of justice, or repotting them, doesn't always work out the way we think it should. It's not always clear how the little everyday things make a difference. Sometimes it seems pretty safe to say that they don't. That thing you decided to stand up for, or that idea you worked so hard to promote, that little way you tried to make the world more just, seems to have turned into just another dead aloe plant, and you have to start from scratch. Graduation is an exciting time. We'll all face our share of challenges and frustrations in the years to come. We'll all experience some failure, and we'll all see some of our dreams and plans that don't come to fruition. But maybe sowing seeds isn't always about whether the plant grows. Maybe it's about working the soil. Maybe gifting aloe plants isn't always about the survival of the aloe plant. It's about sharing and friendship. And maybe doing justice, doing our best to make the world a better place in our own way, isn't always about whether it works the way we planned. Maybe it's about showing up and making the effort. So I'd like to leave us with a challenge, something to think about as we walk across this stage tomorrow. Whatever seeds of justice you have to offer the world, don't hold on to them, waiting for the perfect moment, the moment you're sure they're guaranteed to grow and grow well. As we leave this imperfect community and enter a wider and just as imperfect world, remember that we need people to sow seeds of justice, just as badly as we need people to nurture them. I challenge us to do justice, not because we know it will make the world a more just place, although that's always the hope, but to do justice because justice itself is worth doing. Because a life filled with determined and self-reflective acts of justice, even in the face of failure, is a life worth living. So here we are. We made it. All this time looking forward to graduation, and now it's just over 16 hours away. But after we walk across the stage, after we move the tassels, after we've said our goodbyes, I hope we're ready for what's next. I hope we're ready to use whatever tools we have, even if they're as modest as a cut-up egg carton and a dirty spoon, to go out into the world, ready to sow and nurture some seeds of justice. And if you think a baby aloe plant would help you get started, find me later.
I may not be star, but what I am. I thank the Lord for making me his child. Thank you, Lord, for hearing every prayer. Thank you, Lord, for just being there. Thank you, Lord, for I am not worthy of your love. I may not be all that you are. I may not be a shining star, but what I am, I thank the Lord for making me his child. So don't use me or abuse me, for I am his child. Don't tease me or mistreat me, for I'm still his child. You can't even talk about me, but I'm still his child.
Matthew's Gospel shares with us a powerful parable that reflects how Jesus understood what it means to do justice. Consistent with the Hebrew Scriptures, the parable reminds us that the kingdom of God is home to those who care for the weakest and the most vulnerable among us. Justice is about caring actions towards those who have no power or voice, not just about correct belief. Hear this parable of Jesus that speaks of how we too might sow seeds of justice by reaching out with a caring hand. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me."
Good evening. My hometown is a small suburb of Pittsburgh that, until very recently, was particularly monochrome. People in the area sometimes refer to it as an affluent, white, Christian bubble just outside of a relatively diverse city. In many ways, coming to Juniata was my first exposure to diversity in all of its forms. One of my very first and most lasting friends at Juniata is transgender. I'll never forget the first time that I heard someone ask what his preferred gender pronouns were. I sat in silence and complete befuddlement during their entire conversation, not wanting to ask the wrong question or say the wrong thing. Later in that day, a different friend gave me a small crash course in gender studies to get me up to speed. Over the course of the next year, I befriended even more individuals with backgrounds, beliefs, and identities very different from my own. With that initial exposure came realization. Realization that my friends faced hardship that I had not previously acknowledged, much less understood. Realization that the world is not a just and equitable place. I was forced to consider not only how I might support and be an ally to my friends, but also how I might fight for the creation of a more just world. Right now, we live in a time filled with protest and petitions. If you are anything like me, your social media feeds are likely filled with what feels like a constant barrage of attacks on our democracy and on those we care about. Each day seems to bring with it a new reason to call or write Washington, or a new reason to grieve for the loss of violent life, just like in Texas. It is exhausting and overwhelming to think of all the issues that need our attention, ranging from the epidemic of sexual assault in our society to global climate change. As we try to repair our broken world, we might find that emotionally it breaks us too. Tomorrow, we are graduating, and as we do, we become citizens of a nation and a world filled with challenge. These burdens become our own, and we are responsible for the future that our society creates. And so I ask, when the problems facing our societies seek to overwhelm us, as we strive towards a better place, how do we renew our spirit? For me, at least, the answer is faith. I have been a spiritual seeker all of my life, and a lot of my time at Juniata has been spent with the beautiful and supportive people at the Unity House sitting behind me, who have facilitated my spiritual journey and who encouraged engaging in interfaith dialogue. I am fascinated by what draws people to faith. More importantly, I am fascinated by the unshakable stability of those in my life who have a strong faith. Famously, one of my grandmothers fell a few years ago. She was in her mid-80s, and perhaps appropriately for this speech, she fell outside of church. Her knee was completely shattered. When she was hospitalized, doctors put not only 2 plates, but 12 screws into her leg. However, my grandmother is a woman of powerful faith. When I called her in the hospital, she recited one of her most well-known sayings, "Honey, if you worry, why pray? And if you pray, why worry?" After her initial fall, my dad sent me a picture of my grandmother's x-ray. I kept it on my phone for many years because I am so proud of my grandmother's indomitable spirit. She possesses great, unwavering strength that guides her life and originates from her faith. In times of darkness, she is always full of hope. Dave Wachowski told me once that you cannot pour from an empty cup. This is true of any of us, but when we become beaten down by the seemingly insurmountable problems of our world, faith can act as a kind of bottomless well, refilling our cups to be poured out in the service of others. My grandmother's cup is always overflowing, and by finding spiritual strength, ours can be too. Spirituality has a unique ability to ground us and to revitalize us. This is something I learned at Juniata. When we approach activism with a spiritual heart, we find hidden strength to continue to work towards a better future in these broken times. We become powerful and brave when we are renewed through spiritual healing and reinvigorated through spiritual motivation. Problems no longer seem unconquerable, and we too can be full of hope. For me, Juniata has been a place of great challenge. I have come face to face with many of the issues facing our society. I have been burnt out and hopeless as I tried to do my part to make a difference. However, I have learned from those here who are filled with hope and filled with love, how to fill my cup. I look toward faith to renew me, and in my journey at Juniata, my spirituality has become a place of strength. As I move forward to life after college, it is my hope that my spirituality continues to grow and I continue to use my refilled cup for the betterment of others and of the world. During this service today, and during your life as a college graduate, I invite you, whatever your spiritual orientation is, to reflect with me. How do you renew yourself in a difficult world? How do you give yourself strength to strive for justice in society? Do you turn to spirituality's bottomless well to fill your cup? And most importantly, do you pour out your cup in the service of others?
Good evening. My name is Caitlin Roth, though many of you seated here will know me just as Roth. Tonight, I want to speak about a compassionate and empathetic approach to justice. This is a topic very close to my heart and at the root of the work that I am pursuing beyond Juniata. The Charter for Compassion, originally written in 2009, reminds us that compassion is at the center of any act of justice, and that compassion and justice both transcend and permeate multiple religious traditions and spiritual philosophies. The Charter website states, "Aware that our world is deeply troubled and polarized, the Charter for Compassion is committed to making the world a better place. We work to establish and sustain cultures of compassion locally and globally through diverse sectors. We believe that a compassionate world is a peaceful world. We believe that a compassionate world is possible when every person treats others as they wish to be treated, with dignity, equity, and respect." May this charter speak to us and challenge us as well. The principle of compassion lies at the heart of all religious, ethical, and spiritual traditions, calling us always to treat all others as we wish to be treated ourselves. Compassion impels us to work tirelessly to alleviate the suffering of our fellow creatures, to dethrone ourselves from the center of our world and put another there, and to honor the inviolable sanctity of every single human being, treating everybody without exception with absolute justice, equity, and respect. It is also necessary in both public and private life to refrain consistently and empathically, from inflicting pain, to act or speak violently out of spite, chauvinism, or self-interest, to impoverish, exploit, or deny basic rights to anybody, and to incite hatred by denigrating others, even our enemies, is a denial of our common humanity. We acknowledge that we have failed to live compassionately, and that some have even increased the sum of human misery in the name of religion. We therefore call upon all men and women to restore compassion to the center of morality and religion, to return to the ancient principle that any interpretation of Scripture that breeds violence, hatred, or disdain is illegitimate, to ensure that youth are given accurate and respectful information about other traditions, religions, and cultures, to encourage a positive appreciation of cultural and religious diversity, to cultivate an informed empathy with the suffering of all human beings, even those regarded as enemies. We urgently need to make compassion a clear, luminous, and dynamic force in our polarized world. Rooted in a principled determination to transcend selfishness, compassion can break down political, dogmatic, ideological, and religious boundaries. Born of our deep interdependence, compassion is essential to human relationships and to a fulfilled humanity. It is the path to enlightenment and indispensable to the creation of a just economy and a peaceful global community. Lastly, I would be remiss not to share with you all a rumination which has influenced my path here at Juniata. Still, after all this time, the sun has never said to the earth, "You owe me." Look what happens with love like that. It lights up the sky. And I would add, it grows amazing gardens.
spring break of our sophomore year, I flew with an interfaith bunch from Juniata down to New Orleans for a week of service and learning. Together, we attended religious services from each other's faiths. We worked in community gardens in the lower 9th Ward, and we listened to the stories of the city. David Young was the man behind the community gardens. If you want to picture him, you should know that he has this big, gray, wiry beard that dominates his face, and which is almost as big as his heart. I mean, this is a man who rescues bees from exterminators, builds them little homes, collects their honey, and sells it so that he can continue to feed his community for free. A community that is located in a food desert in the US that has been abused and neglected by the rest of our country. David is a man who knows what it means to sow and to nurture the seeds of justice. I remember on our first day working with David Young, he took us to visit this beautiful small garden. Honeybees buzzed between the rows of broccoli, and cinder blocks created flower pots. Inside a modest greenhouse, a hodgepodge of reclaimed bathtubs had been repurposed into an aquaculture system. This site, David told us, was his first garden in the lower 9th Ward. So much hope and progress had grown out of this tiny garden. This site, David also told us, was very close to where the first levee broke during Hurricane Katrina. The house had been completely obliterated, and the 5 people inside had died. Sunlight streamed into the greenhouse like a repurposed cathedral, and we knew we stood on hallowed ground. I know we were only there for a week, but New Orleans impressed me as such a place of juxtapositions, unexpected harmonies, and discordant contradictions. In David's gardens, of course, there were the bits of broken homes, bathtubs, and cinder blocks, living their second lives as farm equipment. We also visited centuries-old cemeteries where violets pushed up through the cracks and stonewash on old tombs. We visited the Backstreet Museum, housed in a cozy converted funeral home, where they display the elaborate hand-beaded Mardi Gras suits that are the product of a living, interwoven Native American and African American tradition. The cultural contributions of Black communities to New Orleans are celebrated as the heart and life of this city. And at the same time, historically, racist housing systems have pushed Black communities to the outskirts of the city, to the lower floodplains. And today, recovery efforts by the city for these most gravely affected sectors are still slow. Speaking of juxtapositions, driving through the lower 9th Ward every day, we were struck with how these Brad Pitt houses, oddly shaped and brightly colored, stood out from the other shotgun homes and vacant lots of the sector. These houses are the product of an initiative by Brad Pitt, and they were the subject of controversy. They were criticized for not fitting into the neighborhood, for being prohibitively expensive by their design, and for promoting gentrification even in the neighborhood they were meant to serve. We also encountered fellow teams of sweaty, enthusiastic volunteers beautifying some of the vacant lots by cutting down the long grasses. David Young pointed out to us that while such efforts produced a nice before and after photo for the visiting volunteers, tall weeds would quickly grow back. The only lasting effects of such efforts were just to barely keep certain blighted properties acceptable enough to prevent repossession by the city, and so this also prevented them from being transformed into something useful for the community. You know, I think for us to be creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace, we need to listen and we need to act. To listen and to act. Maybe the story of the lower 9th Ward is the story of what happens when we listen but don't act. The devastation of Hurricane Katrina certainly dominated national news in its day, and many people certainly responded with compassion, but collectively, we did not do enough. And the jarring Brad Pitt houses and the sweaty teams whacking weeds look to me like the products of action without listening. Compassionate thoughts are not enough. We may sing, "For everyone born, a place at the table." But how do we build that place at the table? How do we sow the seeds of justice? We must listen and we must act with compassion. These past 4 years, we've done a lot of listening to lectures and books. We've also listened to the painful stories that have unfolded on our campus, in our nation, and around our world. Through the winter, we've been hunkered down in our dorm rooms and classrooms and at library desks, listening, learning. Now it is springtime in this, our corner of the universe. Tony Ricci, a farmer here in Huntingdon, included this note in his CSA price list a few weeks back. He wrote, "It's time to start planting seeds. Signs of spring are appearing everywhere to remind me that winter respite has nearly run its course." End quote. Now it is springtime in this chapter of our lives. For the graduates, and for everyone gathered here, today is the first day of the rest of our lives. Today we must ask ourselves, will we listen and act with compassion? Will we let these principles guide the choices we make, the work we pursue? Signs of spring are appearing everywhere to remind us that the winter respite has nearly run its course. It's time to start planting seeds.
Good evening, everyone. Printed in your program, you will find your response to our litany of celebration. Please join your voices in the response when invited by us to do so. The past few days have been filled with time to reflect, to remember, and relax. Tonight, as we take time to celebrate together, it is wonderful to be surrounded by family and friends, by teachers and mentors, and to recall together the many reasons we have to be grateful. Today, we celebrate the many blessings of our journey together.
We give thanks tonight for all that Juniata College has meant to us, how it has touched and shaped our lives, and how our lives have become interwoven over the years. We celebrate our daily life together, reflecting back on the presence of caring friends, those who lived and laughed with us, those who sat with us during tough times, those who got lost in honest conversation with us deep into the night. Today, we celebrate the many blessings of our journey together.
We give thanks for faculty and staff who sought to teach us even in times when we were less than willing to learn, those who believed in us and encouraged us to follow our dreams, and who served us dinner at Madrigal, who forgave us for completely crushing them in a game of tug-of-war on Mountain Day, and who demonstrated their trust by lying down on a bed of nails. Today, we celebrate the many blessings of our journey together.
We give thanks to you, our families and friends as well. You were always there for us, supporting us with your love, encouragement, and whenever possible, a welcome care package, a weekend visit filled with washing of dirty laundry, or a home-cooked meal, or taking us out for a meal at Boxer's or Standing Stone, or really anywhere but Baker.
Today, we celebrate the many blessings of our journey together. Working together, we have seen many of our dreams come to fulfillment. We give special thanks for the beauty and the diversity of the many people with whom we have shared this journey, as well as the beauty and diversity of the trees, flowers, and open spaces of this campus where we have grown. Today, we celebrate the many blessings of our journey together.
And today, each of our future beckons a place where we can be sowers of justice and joy. Today, we celebrate the many blessings of our journey together.
Good evening. This night is one of those nights I look forward to every year. And this marks, I believe, my 19th time being in this place, in this time. And every year, it continues to overwhelm me as I think about all that it means. I reflect on the growth that we get to witness in our students over the years that is just beautiful to watch. I am so grateful tonight for those who have served as leaders over the years on our campus, and especially for those who have spoken to our hearts tonight, these leaders on the podium tonight. As always, I am very grateful to Dr. Russ Shelley and to the concert choir of Juniata, who always makes this time so rich with music. And for David Meadows as well, for helping us as well sing together. And I am very appreciative of President Troha and his consistent support for this service and for your commitment to all that happens on this campus throughout the year. And there's a lot happening, right? All year long. As I was reflecting a little bit on this theme that you've heard others talk about tonight, sowing seeds of justice, I couldn't help but find myself sort of jumping into my own little TARDIS that I have at home and going back a few years to when I was 10 years old. I jumped out at, believe it or not, 1966. And I had a great memory that at the time was also very troubling for me. I remembered how hard I had to work on my parents to buy me a new bike at that time. We had agreed that I would get a new bike if I would do 3 things. If I would be well behaved for a period of time until it was time, which, hard to believe knowing what a wonderful person I am now, at the time was one of the most difficult challenges for me to follow through on. The second one was for me to help out around the house without complaining, a challenge as well. And the third was that I had to help earn some of the money at least to make sure that I was contributing my fair share to this project. Reluctantly, I agreed because the bike I was riding had not kept up with me as I was growing. Every year it seemed to get smaller and smaller and made it more and more difficult to ride. And quite honestly, it wasn't the best bike to begin with to be seen around town when you're 10 years old. So I set about my project, doing odd jobs for neighbors and church members, doing my part, and even helped out on a local farm a few days after school. Finally, I remember the day came. I got my first brand new bike. It was a black Sears bike with that soft seat and the little white racing stripes. Some over here may remember. It was a great bike. But then I noticed something else. I noticed that there was a second box that looked just like my box that my bike came in. And I stopped short. My parents were challenged at that moment by me. And I thought, in terms of justice, clearly this was a message that they loved my brother more than they did me. Well, I asked the question, and my parents said something like, well, we decided really that your brother should have a new bike as well. That way he can join you on your travels around town, and it will take care of his bike needs for several years because, quite honestly, he needed one just as badly as you did. But I protested. He didn't earn it. He did not deserve anything like this. I had worked so hard for it. But my parents replied calmly, but it just didn't seem fair to us for one of you to get a new bike and the other not to get one when truly you both needed one. I was devastated. I had worked really hard to get that bike, and I had even treated my brother and my sister nicely for a longer period of time than I had ever done in history, just for the record. Here was an injustice in my mind, likely never experienced in rural Indiana before, as far as I was concerned. Well, you know, somehow our family weathered that storm, and now it even looks a little silly as I look back at it. But at the time, It seemed like a terrible injustice because all I could see was how their cruelty, their actions had hurt me. As far as I was concerned, they might have even done it on purpose. I don't know. We do this a lot, though, don't we? Don't we have a habit sometimes of assuming the worst of others because we don't know the whole story? We don't know their story. And because we don't really understand the other in a given situation. Luckily, as it turns out, my parents were wiser than I knew. They knew that justice is something that is really important, and it's something deeper than the 10-year-old me was ready to grasp. They knew that justice is about how we live our lives in the big picture, about how we treat those least able to be heard or seen, including, in fact, maybe even especially, how we treat our little brothers. That experience and others like it planted seeds in me about the deeper meaning of justice that would grow slowly in my life. In fact, to be honest, I think it wasn't until I attended seminary that I began to grasp a meaning of justice that is different than that of our broader culture often. So often in our culture today, justice means little more than punishing someone for what they've done. I'm not saying tonight that people shouldn't have to deal with the consequences of their actions. I'm simply saying that there is so much more to planting seeds of justice in our world than that which we often recognize and act on in our society. Sometimes I would suggest we act more like me at 10 years old, noticing only what makes my life better or worse, unable to recognize the deep needs that are just beyond my own. Through the scriptures that you heard tonight, and through the interfaith and secular writings like the Charter for Compassion, we learn how much richer our world could be if we could expand our understanding of compassion to be closer to that which is expressed in the Bible and in the other wisdom traditions. I was recently discussing tonight's theme with the well-known biblical scholar, Dr. Bob Miller, professor of religion here at Juniata, in fact. And I appreciated Bob's insights very much and wanted to share just a bit of that with you. Bob suggested that when the biblical prophets judge the righteousness, and that by righteousness we mean the moral health of our society, they use only one criterion, and that is how society treats the most vulnerable among them, often worded as the poor, the orphans, the widows, and the aliens. That's why I think this Deuteronomy passage that was read tonight fascinates me and helps me so much. It essentially says to us, if you miss something when you're harvesting your fields, let it go. Because justice is found in remembering that you and your own profit or prosperity are not the only important thing to pay attention to. It matters to God. It matters to your spiritual and moral health that you notice and help provide those that are often invisible, ignored, and even oppressed in our world with something that they need. As I was going through time, I remembered one other thing. I remembered very clearly the first time I took a group of youth from our church to Washington, D.C. for a service project. I remember the woman who had planned our service projects for us that week, talking to this group of teens from rural Pennsylvania, many of whom had never left Pennsylvania. And she said to us, "You will encounter homeless people this week. You may see them sitting on the street or playing an instrument, or they may be coming through your soup kitchen line. They may ask you for money. Whether you give them money or not isn't the most important thing. Doing so or not doing so is your decision. But what I ask of you this week, she said, and what is most important, is that whether you decide to give someone money or not, look them in the eye and give them an answer when they speak to you. Look them in the eye, see them, notice them, and show them respect because they are people who also deserve dignity and respect. The homeless are most often treated in our world as if they are invisible. See them and acknowledge them. They will appreciate it, and you will be serving justice, she told us. One of the most important things I learned that week was that I didn't need to alleviate hunger in Washington, D.C. all by myself. I have a little bit of a Messiah complex sometimes. But I learned instead that I was doing justice. I was living justice each time I treated someone else with respect and dignity. The little things do matter. It brings me back to the scripture from Matthew's gospel that we heard tonight that ends with these words. The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did unto me." These people that Jesus was referring to were people who were simply living out lives of compassion and justice, not to get a reward, but to be more loving and compassionate people in their world because they knew it would make a difference. In fact, they were surprised, we are told in this parable, at the importance and the significance of the actions they apparently just took for granted. They were willing to see those in need as people of dignity and worth, worthy of a visit, of proper nutrition and clothing. They refused to ignore or look down on others, whether they knew them or not. How we treat others in our daily journey through life does matter. We can make a difference in the lives of others, and we too will be blessed by being willing to take risks and make sacrifices to lift others up. Some people are suggesting that our society is becoming more isolated, that we are focusing more and more on being tribal people, if you will, turning inward and dismissing those who aren't like us or those who frighten us because they seem to threaten our lifestyle or our status. We must resist the urge to do so, to stay safe by avoiding the difficulty of lifting up the poor, the orphans, the widows, and the aliens, as the scriptures remind us. So my plea tonight, for you who are graduating especially, begins with curiosity. May you turn around and look outward, not inward. May you allow yourself to be uncomfortable in order to be a more compassionate and just person. Step out of your comfort zone to speak to and to speak up on behalf of people who are frequently ignored and left behind. Allow your world and your trust in people to expand rather than to give in to the temptation to play it safe. Tomorrow at your graduation, class of 2018, many of you will be wearing that green ribbon that we've talked about in response to the pledge, the one that says, "I will explore and take into account the social and environmental consequences of any job I consider and will try to improve these aspects of any organization for which I work." In short, this is your pledge, to be justice workers and to be people of compassion. As you go out as Juniata grads tomorrow, take the time to soak in what you have learned here, not just in the classroom, but from your experiences across this campus and beyond. Appreciate those you met that were most unlike you, those that confused you or frustrated you, for it is often on those difficult edges of life that we have the most opportunity to grow and learn. as you go, may you embrace life, as has been suggested by all our speakers tonight. Live it to its fullest. Tell people they matter to you. Offer forgiveness so that you don't find yourself stuck in regret. Smile at the person on the street. Lend a hand. Plant, or if you need to, repot seeds of justice. For as many traditions in our world remind us in different ways, it has been said, if anyone saved a life, it would be as if they saved the life of all mankind. Our daily actions and commitments will shape our moral character and grow far beyond our individual efforts, changing our world in ways that will continue to surprise us each day. Amen.
Would you stand and join me in singing verses 3 through 5? For young and for old, a place at the table, a voice to be heard, a part in the song. The hands of a child in hands that are wrinkled, for young and for old, the right to belong. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice, justice and joy. For just and unjust, a place at the table, abuser abused with need to forgive. In anger and hurt, a mindset of mercy. For just and unjust, a new way to live. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy. For everyone born, a place at the table, to live without fear and simply to be, to work, to speak out, to witness and worship. For everyone born, the right to be free. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy.
Tonight, we have sung of what our world might look like if we are creators of justice, compassion, and peace, living our lives in a way that creates a place at the table for all people. We have read and heard Holy Scripture challenge us with the idea that justice is about how we treat and live alongside the most vulnerable, poor, marginalized members of our society, making certain to serve their interest, needs, and cause. We have shared with you a challenge to be more compassionate, to treat others as we wish to be treated ourselves, from the creators of the Charter for Compassion. and we have heard reflections on a variety of personal journeys by interfaith leaders as they have discovered new ways to sow seeds of justice. Our intentions matter. Be humble, gracious, compassionate, and merciful. It will lead to hope, justice, and peace. The challenge to us all is to lead with open hearts and arms spread wide, embracing our neighbors. As Robert Fulghum wrote in his essay, All the Things I Really Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, quote, and it is still true, no matter how old you are, go out into the world. It is best to hold hands and stick together, end quote. May you and you and you and you, may we all go forth into the world, planting seeds and sowing justice side by side.
Every time I feel the Spirit moving into my heart, I will pray, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving into my heart, I will pray. Yes, I will pray. Upon the mountain where I was born, out of His mouth came fire and smoke, and all around me looked so fine. I asked the Lord if all was fine. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, I will pray. The Jordan River is chilly and cold. It chills the body, not the soul. There ain't but one train that runs this track, runs up to heaven and right back. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, every time I